The ancient Darksaber is without a shadow of a doubt one of the most powerful and interesting lightsabers in all of Star Wars canon. Again, one of the oldest lightsabers that we've ever seen depicted in canon. It's beautiful and exceptionally unique, with the reasoning behind its uniqueness still a total mystery in Star Wars, despite the Darksaber being introduced into Star Wars canon all the way back in the Clone Wars era, before Disney's acquisition of the Star Wars property as a whole, and we still know next to nothing about the history of the Darksaber, or at least what makes it function the way it does. Today though, we will break down the full history of the Darksaber, from the original Mandalorian Jedi that wielded it to the hands of the individual that now holds it. With that said, there will be spoilers in this video for the Clone Wars, Rebels, as well as the Mandalorian, so if you're not caught up on any of these properties, please go do so before continuing with the video. With that said, let's dive into the deep, layered history of the ancient Darksaber. The Darksaber was an ancient and unique black-bladed lightsaber created by Tar Vizsla, the first Mandalorian ever inducted into the Jedi Order, with this occurring around 1,000 years before the events of the Clone Wars. Using the Darksaber, Tar Vizsla managed to unite all of Mandalore under his clan, Clan Vizsla. However, upon Tar Vizsla's passing, the lightsaber was taken back to the Jedi Order and to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, where it would remain for several decades. The weapon was decided to be kept in the temple after Vizsla's passing, but members of House Vizsla stole the lightsaber in a conflict with the Jedi during the fall of the Old Republic, an event that we know very little about in Star Wars canon. Following this, the Darksaber was passed down generation to generation by the ancestors of Pre Vizsla, who held on to the weapon even after the pacifist ideals of the new Mandalorians replaced their warrior culture. Before we continue with the history of the Darksaber, I would now like to talk about its functionality. The Darksaber had a unique blade that was shorter than most of the other lightsabers, and shaped like a traditional sword. Its overall profile was distinctly Mandalorian, with an angular pommel, handguard, and slit-shaped blade emitter. The sound emitted by its blade was also higher pitched than other lightsabers. The Darksaber had a crystal which served as the conduit for force energy, as is typical for a lightsaber. The reason for its black coloration, however, is unknown. The wielder's thoughts and actions guided the blade's current of power, with the blade often producing an electrical effect in response to heightened emotional states of wielders, something that is again a unique function to the Darksaber. During the Clone Wars, the Darksaber came into the possession of Pre Vizsla, governor of Concordia and leader of Death Watch. Vizsla kept it on his back when he wore his armor, being a descendant of the Mandalorian Jedi Tar Vizsla. During the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi of the Jedi Council discovered Death Watch's camp near the planet's mines. Using the Darksaber, Vizsla fought Kenobi as his troops evacuated. Though he boasted some skill in lightsaber combat, Vizsla was unable to defeat Kenobi or prevent his escape with Duchess Satine. Over the course of the Clone Wars, Pre Vizsla would engage another Jedi in lightsaber combat, that being the Padawan of Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, and again would be bested, with Pre Vizsla not able to tap into the Force like his ancestor had. Still though, for a non-Force wielder, he possessed great skill with the weapon. Eventually, Pre Vizsla, while in possession of the Darksaber, would come into contact with the Sith brothers Savage Opress and Darth Maul, and although they worked together for a time, they would eventually turn on each other, although with their combined might, they managed to achieve taking control over Mandalore, and proclaiming themselves their leaders. Pre Vizsla and Maul, though, engaged in single combat for rights over Mandalore as well as the Darksaber, and Pre Vizsla was ultimately defeated by the former Sith Lord. Although Maul refused to use any Force abilities in this confrontation, he was simply more skilled with the blade than Pre Vizsla was, beheading Pre Vizsla on the throne. After Darth Maul allured Obi-Wan Kenobi back to Mandalore, Maul used the Darksaber to kill Duchess Satine in front of Kenobi, as part of his revenge against the Jedi Master for the events that occurred in the Phantom Menace, and Obi-Wan cutting Maul in half. Just a short time later though, the Dark Lord of the Sith Darth Sidious personally confronted Maul and Savage Opress, butchering Maul's brother in Savage and then engaging in lightsaber combat with Darth Maul, who brandished the Darksaber. Maul though, again proved to be no match for his former master. Following this however, Maul was able to escape the clutches of Darth Sidious by using the Darksaber, and came came into conflict with both General Grievous as well as Count Dooku. Maul used the saber when he boarded Grievous's dreadnought, and used the Darksaber to keep him in check during the Battle of Ord Mantell. Maul then threatened to kill Dooku with the Darksaber as a means of revenge against Sidious, and a means as revenge against replacing him. However, Maul freed Dooku, and the two used their weapons against Kenobi, Mace Windu, and Aayla Secura, as all of the Jedi forces attacked the ship. After Maul returned to his homeworld of Dathomir to help Mother Talzin regain her physical form, Maul was confronted by Darth Sidious and Grievous. With Mother Talzin finally being killed by Grievous, Maul was allowed to flee the planet with the Darksaber, although Maul would later directly return to Dathomir after Darth Sidious and Grievous departed. The Darksaber was still on Dathomir during the reign of the Galactic Empire, kept by Maul in the Night Sisters' lair. Sabine Wren would use the lightsaber against Ezra Bridger while she was possessed by an ancient Night Sister spirit, but after she was freed from the spirit, Sabine would recognize the Darksaber as Mandalorian in heritage, taking it for herself, believing that Maul was unworthy to possess such a weapon. Sabine Wren would then be taught in the ways of the Darksaber by Jedi Knight Kanan Jarrus, and how to wield the Darksaber just as her ancestors had. Although Sabine believed herself unworthy at first to wield the weapon, she would eventually grow to love it, and gain her worthiness after forgiving herself for originally helping the Empire as a cadet. Eventually, Sabine would travel to Clan Wren with the lightsaber, her own family, believing that Clan Wren could help out the rebellion a great deal with their battle against the Empire, and that the Darksaber would again unite Mandalore. However, they ultimately decided not to join Sabine, as Sabine had not defeated Maul in single combat to take the blade, meaning that they viewed her as an illegitimate leader. Clan Wren, though, would later be betrayed by Saxon, who would reveal himself as an Emperor's hand and a false Mandalorian, taking the Darksaber for his own for a time. Sabine, though, taking Ezra Bridger's lightsaber, engaged him in single combat, and managed to defeat him, sparing his life, but again proving that she was worthy of the Darksaber, and the great heritage that went along with it. Sometime later, Sabine ultimately decided to hand over the Darksaber to Bo-Katan, as Sabine's heart was always with the rebellion and not the people of Mandalore. Although at first hesitant, Bo-Katan eventually accepted the Darksaber as her own, and after a speech from Sabine saying that the Force had willed the Darksaber back to Mandalore, all of the Mandalorians united under Bo-Katan, as Sabine went off with her friends, with Mandalore seemingly restored. However, tragedy would soon strike Mandalore, as the Empire would enact the Great Purge against the Mandalorian people, killing the majority of all Mandalorians left in the wider galaxy, although a few of them were able to escape. It is believed that Moff Gideon personally killed Bo-Katan during the Great Purge of Mandalore, and although Bo-Katan valiantly led her people to war against the Empire, she was ultimately defeated over sheer numbers, with Moff Gideon stripping the lightsaber from Bo-Katan, and keeping it for himself for a period of at least 7 years. Moff Gideon would even possess the Darksaber 5 years after the collapse of the Empire. This is the last we know of the Darksaber in Star Wars canon history, again with a deep and layered heritage, with it being awful now that it's in the hands of an Imperial, especially an Imperial that's personally responsible for the deaths of hundreds, potentially thousands of Mandalorians. But the story of the Darksaber is not over. When concerning the Mandalorians, this is what they had to say personally about the Darksaber. Because we were willing to die for our cause, we became the Death Watch, led by the secret Mandalores, to ensure we would be led by the most powerful. We declared that any warrior could challenge the secret Mandalore for leader of Death Watch, and as our symbol of authority, we chose the Darksaber, an ancient weapon liberated from the Jedi long ago. The Darksaber is super significant to Star Wars canon, as to my current knowledge, it's the second oldest lightsaber that we know about, behind the Proto-Saber that is only briefly mentioned in the Darth Vader series. It is also the only black lightsaber in all of Star Wars canon and most of Star Wars Legends, and the only lightsaber of this type, with a far different blade that is typical. It is also significant as it is one of the most famous Jedi weapons, and also at the same time one of the most famous weapons known for killing Jedi. The creator of the Darksaber, Dave Filoni, had this to say about the ancient weapon upon its original debut in the Clone Wars. The lightsaber actually has a crackle of electricity. It's kind of like a more ancient version of a lightsaber, and it's inferred in the episode that it's really one of a kind, and that previous ancestors stole it from the Jedi Temple in the days of the Old Republic. So it's got all this neat history attached to it, and it sounds very different. Originally in the episode, Pre Vizsla was going to actually possess a simple vibroblade. However, George Lucas suggested that they alter this, and give him a more unique weapon. What ultimately resulted is now the famous Darksaber. But what are your guys' thoughts on the history of the Darksaber weapon in Star Wars? And how surprised were you to see it at the end of The Mandalorian season finale? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.